The 9th of September 1985. A remote road near Skopeti. The Volkswagen van sat motionless, its engine cold, swallowed by the thick silence of the Tuscan hills. Inside, two travelers remained still, unaware of the movement just beyond the tree line. A sudden, sharp beam of light sliced through the dense foliage, sweeping across the dark metal of the van. The beam paused. A shadow detached itself from the trees, moving with deliberate, silent steps toward the side window. The air held its breath for a heartbeat. Then, the sound of glass shattering ripped through the night, followed by the jagged noise of a struggle. The peace of the forest evaporated in an instant. Metal groaned under pressure. A door swung outward, hitting the gravel with a heavy thud. Within seconds, the quiet road transformed into a scene of sudden, violent chaos. The light flickered once, illuminated the interior, and then vanished. The woods settled back into a heavy, suffocating stillness. The hunt had claimed its prize, leaving nothing behind but the scattered shards of a broken window and the echoes of a terror that would haunt the region for decades to come. This was not a singular event. To understand the shadow that fell over Skopeti, one must look back to the summer of 1968. That was when the pattern began, etched into the dirt roads and hidden pull-offs of Tuscany. The method was chillingly consistent. A killer stalked the hills, waiting for the cover of night to descend upon unsuspecting couples. The weapon of choice remained a Beretta caliber .22, a small-bore pistol that left behind a signature of precision and cold intent. These secluded spots, favored for their privacy and distance from the city, became the primary hunting grounds. The killer moved through the darkness like a ghost, selecting vehicles parked in the quiet gaps between the trees. Every attack followed the same grim script. The silence of the hills was no longer a refuge, but a trap. For those who sought solitude in the dark, the Tuscan landscape transformed into a graveyard. The killer knew the terrain, knew the vulnerabilities of those who stopped to rest, and operated with a regularity that defied the natural order of the region. A cycle of violence had taken root, one that would haunt the hills for nearly 2 decades, turning every parked vehicle into a potential crime scene. For 17 years, the police force chased shadows through a labyrinth of their own making. Every crime scene yielded a handful of shell casings and a mountain of confusion. Detectives fanned out across Tuscany, knocking on doors, recording statements, and filling rooms with stacks of thin yellowing paper. They interrogated hundreds of men who worked in the fields or drove the winding roads at night. Each interview promised a breakthrough, yet each ended in a dead end. Evidence was mishandled or simply lost in the shuffle of bureaucracy. Reports contradicted one another, and witness accounts shifted under the pressure of repeated questioning. A fingerprint found on a door handle led to a local farmer, only for the alibi to shatter the theory hours later. The public watched as the authorities stumbled over the same obstacles, time and time again. Newspapers printed headlines of frustration, highlighting the helplessness of a system unable to capture a ghost. The police walked the same dark paths where the victims had fallen, searching for footprints that had long since been washed away by rain or obscured by time. The investigation became a closed loop, consuming resources and hope, while the killer remained untouched, hidden in the very terrain the police failed to secure. By the mid-80s, the standard search for a lone gunman had reached a breaking point. Frustration within the station house bled into the public consciousness, and the investigation took a dark, unexpected turn. Detectives began to look beyond the physical evidence, scouring archives for patterns that transcended simple murder. Rumors of clandestine groups and occult rituals started to circulate through the task force. They pored over maps, marking locations not just by crime scenes, but by lunar cycles and ancient landmarks. The theory grew that these were not random acts of violence, but parts of a larger ritualistic design. Investigators spoke in hushed tones about secret societies operating in the shadows of the hills, suggesting that a single man could not possibly maintain such a level of precision for 17 years. This shift changed the nature of the hunt. The killer was no longer just a criminal to be caught, but a symptom of a hidden, organized rot at the heart of Tuscany. They investigated symbols carved into trees, questioned self-proclaimed mystics, and spent nights watching remote groves for signs of midnight congregations. The horror expanded, moving from the tangible threat of a Beretta caliber .22 into the formless, terrifying realm of dark belief. The fever of occult speculation began to break, leaving behind a cold, singular focus. The task force stopped looking at the stars and started looking at the neighbors. They sifted through thousands of local records, cross-referencing past convictions and violent outbursts until one name detached itself from the files: Pietro Pacciani. The investigators pulled his history, tracing a life marked by aggression and erratic behavior. Every report they unearthed seemed to echo the brutality they had tracked for nearly 2 decades. The shift was absolute. They abandoned the theories of secret societies and midnight rituals to track a man living in their midst. Surveillance teams set up positions near his residence, watching every movement he made from the shadows of parked vehicles. They monitored his interactions, his habits, and his irregular hours. The tension inside the task force reached a peak as the pieces of the puzzle aligned. For the first time in 17 years, the police had a face to put to the horror. They finalized the arrest warrants, checked their gear, and prepared to breach the perimeter of his life. The hunt was no longer about ghosts in the woods. It was about a man, and the time for secrets was coming to an end. The arrest of Pietro Pacciani shattered the silence of the Tuscan hills and ignited a national firestorm. Within hours, the local police station was besieged by satellite trucks and frantic journalists. Every movement Pacciani made was captured by a dozen lenses. The case moved from the quiet, dusty archives of the task force directly into the blinding glare of the public spotlight. The trial transformed into a grotesque spectacle, a theater of national obsession where every detail of the suspect's life was stripped bare. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps, fighting for space to document the man accused of terrorizing Tuscany for nearly 2 decades. Inside, the chamber hummed with the constant shutter click of cameras. The prosecutors laid out their files, but the true atmosphere was dictated by the hungry gaze of the spectators. Pacciani sat in the defendant's chair, surrounded by lawyers and the heavy weight of collective judgment. Every twitch of his hand, every shift in his gaze was analyzed by the press as if it were a confession. The law was no longer just weighing evidence. It was feeding a public demand for a monster. The courtroom became a stage, and the hunt for the truth was buried beneath the roar of the crowd. The first verdict hit like a shockwave. Guilty. The courtroom erupted, and for a fleeting moment, the weight of 17 years seemed to dissipate. But the relief was short-lived. The legal machinery churned, grinding through appeals and technicalities until the foundation of the case began to fracture. A higher court overturned the conviction, citing insufficient evidence and procedural errors. The gallery descended into pandemonium. Reporters scrambled to rewrite headlines that had been set in stone only days before. Then, the process reversed once more. Prosecutors surged back, securing a new conviction that sent the public reeling into further uncertainty. The legal battle became a dizzying pendulum, swinging violently between absolute certainty and total doubt. Every time the gavel fell, the crowd braced for a final resolution, only to find the ground shifting beneath them again. Evidence that seemed damning in one session was dismissed as hearsay in the next. The pursuit of justice, once a sharp, focused blade, became a blunt instrument of confusion. Judges, lawyers, and witnesses sparred in a relentless cycle of claims and counterclaims. The objective truth of the case vanished into a maze of conflicting rulings, leaving the victims' families caught in the crossfire of a system that could not decide if it had found its monster or merely a scapegoat. The final appeal hung in the balance, a thread stretched to the breaking point. Then came the phone call that silenced the courtroom. Pietro Pacciani was dead. He had been found in his home, alone. The heart that had allegedly driven a reign of terror finally stilled. The news acted like a sudden vacuum in the chamber. The lawyers stopped their frantic pacing. The judges set down their pens. All the momentum of the prosecution, all the arguments and the vitriol vanished in an instant. There would be no final ruling. There would be no definitive closure. The man labeled as the monster had slipped beyond the reach of the law, leaving behind a void where answers should have been. Outside, the rain began to fall, washing over the steps where the families waited for a verdict that would never arrive. They stood in the grey light, clutching photographs of the lost, their faces reflecting the hollow reality of the moment. The system had failed them, not by error, but by the intervention of mortality. Pacciani took his secrets to the grave, and with him, the last hope for a clear confession died. The courtroom doors swung shut, sealing away the files and the theories, while the families remained on the outside, left to navigate the wreckage of a case that would never truly conclude. The death of the primary suspect did not bring peace. It brought a cascade of questions that refused to dissipate. If he was the architect of the horror, why did the violence stop so abruptly? The pattern of the Beretta caliber .22 had been consistent for years, yet the trail went cold without a clear resolution. Investigators pored over maps, logs, and witness statements, looking for the phantom accomplices that rumors had whispered about for decades. The case files remained heavy with theories of secret societies and hidden agendas, but the physical evidence never aligned with a single coherent narrative. Every lead that once seemed promising now looked like a jagged piece of a broken mirror. The families of the victims were left to grapple with a void, unable to distinguish between the man who had been accused and the unseen forces that might have guided his hand. The silence in the Tuscan hills became a heavy, permanent weight. The authorities officially closed the books, Yet the lack of a definitive truth left a fissure in the public consciousness. Was the monster a solitary figure, or was he merely a shadow cast by something larger and more elusive? The puzzle pieces never fit, and as the years stretched on, the mystery hardened into a legend, leaving only the cold, haunting echo of a question that no one could answer. Today, the archives sit in damp rooms, rows of dusty boxes holding the remnants of a 17-year nightmare. Anyone can read the reports, yet the truth remains locked behind paper and ink. The hills of Tuscany have long since reclaimed their peace, but the local air still carries the weight of 1,985. Every year, new theories emerge, claiming to peel back the layers of the past. Yet they only add to the thicket of rumors. The monster of Florence has become more than a name. It is a ghost that refuses to rest. The Beretta is gone, swallowed by history, and the shadows that once moved through the trees have vanished into the soil. Police departments have rotated, generations of investigators have retired, and the victims' families have grown old waiting for a resolution that never arrived. There is no final chapter to this story. There is only the landscape, the rolling vineyards, and the silence. The mystery does not want to be solved. It lingers in the dusk, a persistent, chilling reminder of a violence that defied explanation. As the sun sets over the Tuscan horizon, the hills guard their secret with absolute, unchanging resolve. The search for the truth ends where it began, in the dark, with no one left to speak and no answers to be found.